We've talked a lot in previous videos about potential pitfalls and do's and don'ts when it comes to indie game development. And for today's video, I think we can sum this up with at least 50 different ways that you can ruin your indie game. And before any of you want to cite that this is just a clickbait or there can't possibly be any, well, I got something to say. It's really not my habit to intrude. Furthermore, I hope my meaning won't be lost or misconstrued, but I'll repeat myself. At the risk of being crude, there must be 50 ways to ruin your indie game. 50 ways to ruin your indie game. And before any of you want to type a comment down below saying, well, actually, this way is more important. Actually, we didn't mention this. This is so important. He hasn't mentioned that. Well, I got two things to say. First, shut up. And second, go hop in your time machine, go back to the 70s, talk to Paul Simon about it, and he can update the song. And while you're at it, explain him what a Metroidvania is at the same time. Before we begin with the list, if this video gets at least 1 million likes, I will put this list to the song and risk getting a potential lawsuit by Paul Simon. So if you really want that, get this video out there. Now, there are actually 50 points I came up with, and I got them somewhat reasonably organized. And we're going to be going through them in somewhat of a rapid-fire way for our video. I'll put a pointer up as well as we switch between them. And maybe I'll do a short as we do a super rapid fire way as well. So, the first point is, of course, don't do any marketing. As we've said time and time again, the days in which you can rely on luck, or your game being really good, or your game just, magically finding its way to a Markiplier or a PewDiePie or anyone else, are long past. You need to do marketing and you need to start as soon as you can get a game out there. Speaking of, point number 2, waiting until the last minute to market your game. Many developers do that either by choice or because they just put it off until the very last minute. You should be doing heavy marketing for your game at minimum, at least 3 months out from release. Any sooner than that, and it becomes a lot harder to get buzz going. You should, again, be doing marketing as soon as you have something viable, unique, interesting, weird, or whatever to show to people. Which goes to our next point, not showing any game footage whatsoever in terms of marketing, in terms of your store page, anything along those lines. There are a lot of developers, again, who are not good at showing or creating trailer footage, and you need to have a good trailer for your game. This is going to be one of the major things you're going to show on social media. It's going to be the second biggest thing people are going to be finding about your game for your store page. The first, obviously, being your capsule art. But there needs to be footage of your game out there. And if it's not, how are people going to know or what it is or even to care about? The next point is not having any GIFs when it comes to marketing. Now, you may think that no GIFs or GIFs should be predominantly for action-based games, shooter, hack and slash, platformers, and all that. But no, you should be able to create a condensed 3 to 5 second clip of your game for any genre. Because if you can't get someone excited about your game in 3 seconds, you really don't have anything that's going to be marketable or something that's going to be interesting. If it's a puzzle game, show off some really weird solution or really weird, puzzle element. If it's a strategy game, show tanks and copters or robots, zombies, orcs, elves, whatever, fighting it out. If it's an RPG, especially if it's an RPG, show me some, big old combat scene. Show me an epileptic seizure-inducing summon. Because again, you have to be able to sit down and think, what makes my game exciting? If you don't have that, you really are going to be behind an 8 ball. Now, let's say you get all that. For the next point, not having a press page or contact information. Because having all that stuff is really great. You know what's also really great? People being able to reach out to you to request a press key, request an interview, get in touch with you. Because if you don't have this, you are leaving a lot of people out in terms of being able to get in touch. And while not everyone is going to be getting in touch with you for great reasons, again, you will of course get scammers and people just wanting, hey, I'll cover your game if you give me 87,000 keys for my 400 subscriber channel. But you still need a way for people to get in touch with you, especially if you are a small developer and you're also looking for a publisher. Because people are not going to go on a scavenger hunt to find you on the internet. If they can't type in your game name or your studio name or even search for you on like an itch or whatever, and they don't know where you are, they're not going to keep looking. They're just going to go to another game that's easier to find. For the next point, it's not figuring out who your consumer base is. Now, this is something that for some of you may not sound like a big deal. You just put your game out there and hopefully people will find it. But in actuality, when you're coming up with the gameplay, when you're trying to figure out what this game is, you need to figure out who's going to buy this game in the first place. Is this a first-person shooter, survival horror, pinball visual novel, dating sim, cooking racing game? You need to figure out who your potential consumer base is going to be, because this is how you're going to start figuring out what you're going to build your game around. Because if you can't answer this simple question, if you just say, well, the game is for me, well, that's great if you're just building a student project or something you don't intend to sell. It's not that good if you're trying to make a living off of this game, or half a living, or just buy soup off of your game. And to build off of that point, our next one is not marketing your game to the correct consumer base. So that's great. You have a survival horror game that's going to be full of blood, guts, gore, heads exploding, spleens being disintegrated. That's great. Maybe you should market that towards, I don't know, elementary school children. What about parents? I'm sure they would love that. I'm sure someone's probably thinking just to do that as I'm saying it. But you need to be able to get in touch or reach out to people who would be interested in your game. Look for Reddit, Discord, forums, whatever. There is a group of gamers for almost every genre out there. See if you can find out where they kind of hang around and reach out to them. This is also a great way to figure out how to get some easy play testers, which we'll come back to in a few more points. But you have to be able to pitch this game to the people that you intend to. If you're building a super casual, family-friendly, very easy game to play, you probably don't want to go to people who soul level 1 every Dark Souls game blindfolded with one hand tied behind their back while they're jumping on a pogo stick and trying to pitch it to them. Our next point is if you over-scope your game. So you have a great idea, you want to put it out there, so you keep adding more to it and more to it. And you're just going to add more levels and more mechanics and more stuff. And it's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And surely all those extra hours and months and weeks and years and maybe decades, and don't forget all the money you put into it, will pay off, right? Well, more often than not, it doesn't. And you need to be able to look realistically at your game and be able to understand what can you make. As we've said, especially in today's kind of market where sustainability is very important, 5 to 10 years on a single game is not the goal anymore. If you can put out games comfortably within 1 to 3 years and grow from game to game, even if they're not that magnum opus that you've been dreaming about since you were 2 years old, it can still help in terms of building studio awareness and allow you to get the skills and the tools that needed to eventually get to that amazing game and hopefully not bankrupt yourself in the process. Getting there takes us to our next point, spending too long figuring out what your game is. This is the killer for many first-time developers. What am I going to make this game? Well, let's start with a platformer. We'll get a quarter of the way through it. Well, you know what? I'm in the mood to make a strategy game. Let's turn this into a real-time strategy game. But you know, I just played the shooter the other day, and I really like that. Let's go make it into a first-person shooter. And I just stabbed a knife into a whole lot of developers out there. You may be feeling it like right here at the moment. You need to be figuring out what your core gameplay loop of your game is as early as you can. You need to be able to do that in order to build a foundation for the marketing, for the consumer base, and even have a plan in terms of how you're going to design this game. And while not every game is going to just magically come to you within 5 seconds of sitting down on your computer, you need to be able to create an actual foundation to work off of. Because as we've said time and time again, changing the core gameplay loop of your game means you are changing the entirety of that game. And that means a lot of wasted time, money, and effort that can keep happening again and again if you keep changing your mind. You figure out what your game is, you know what your core gameplay loop is going to be, you're all set. But how are you going to build that? And that takes us to our next point. When you don't have a plan for developing a game, this is where the rubber meets the road. Again, everyone has 10 million different ideas for games. I'm sure a few of you could probably name a few dozen of them right now in the comments. But how do you take that idea and turn it into a game? I'm not answering that here. You think we're going to do that in a video like this? It takes a lot of work, and the development/management side for game dev is one of the hardest things to learn when you're starting out. This is not something that you can really reasonably go to a school or college to learn. They'll teach you, about programming. They'll teach you about good work or good etiquette for all this kind of stuff. They're not going to teach you how to set up a schedule and work 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe even more hours a day on a project. How do you balance that with your day-to-day life? Do you work with a group? Do you work by yourself? What works best for you? And not figuring this out is often what leads to burnout for developers. When those projects start going from being 6 months to 18 months to 5 years to 8 years to insert time duration here. You need to be able to think about how you're going to develop the game, and more importantly, what you can and can't do. Because this is the other point about it. You can come up with as many amazing ideas as you want. If you can't create a game out of them, none of that really is going to matter to the consumer. They're not going to be able to get in your head and play that dream game. And that means being able to take a very sharp eye to your game design and sit down and go, I can make this, I can't do this. And either I need to hire someone or have someone come in to help me, or I can't put this in my game. And it's painful, but it's something you have to end up doing. Let's say you have that plan for developing your game. Our next point is another very big knife for a lot of developers out there, and that is not having an idea for the art side of your game. Video games are a visual medium, unless we're talking about entirely text-based games. And you need to have some concept of the art style and the aesthetics of your game. And if you can't do that, then you definitely need to hire someone to do that for you. Good art is the first thing that someone is going to see, whether it is the thumbnail/capsule art on a store page, to what you see when you promote your game through trailers, through images, social media, the whole deal. If your game looks low quality, a lot of people are not going to give it the time of day. And before anyone says it, we're not talking about pixel art versus full Unreal, Ultra 4K art. We're talking about your game having a great look to it, having a unified look, and something that can sell people on an image or a video. And speaking about showing things off to people, another big point about having good art is being able to turn that into a great trailer. And this is a point that is becoming more and more important. You need to have something that you can show to people. Something that you can put on a store page. Something you can show to publishers. You can take to conventions, trade shows, the whole deal. Something that can perfectly encapsulate your game in anywhere from 30 to about 120 seconds, give or take. This is the kind of stuff that, again, if you're, depending upon your own skill set, could be either very easy to do or next to impossible. But it's something that needs to be done. You cannot market your game without a trailer. And having a horrible trailer can oftentimes be a killer for consumers who are rapid fire going through a lot of games on Steam, if they're looking at them on a festival, and if your trailer looks bad, they're probably not going to check anything else out for it. But speaking about having something to put on your store page, our next point is, well, not setting up a good store page. I've seen developers once again wait until the last minute to do a store page, and they'll just throw a bunch of stuff on it. No GIFs, no images. It could just be like 2 sentences saying, "This is my game." And that's it. You need to have a great store page, especially if you're an indie developer. You have to be able to sell this game to people. Because if you can't do that, then again, why should they even download your game? Why should they give you any amount of money for it? And if you want more tips about store pages, we can certainly talk about that one until the cows come home. But another part of that is, even if you have a store page set up, you need to make sure to update it to however it's the best possible version of your game. I've seen developers who, for their images and even for their footage, they'll just use like 0.00001 pre-alpha images, where it may even just be all placeholder art for it. As your game goes through development, as things improve and change, you need to make sure to update all your marketing material for your game. And that takes us to our next point, having beta footage in your trailer. And when I say beta footage, I'm talking again about stuff that was kind of like early prototype, early versions. If you're just playing like your very first trailer for your game and that stuff hasn't been developed yet, okay, that's fine. But when it comes time to do heavy marketing for your game, you want to be using all finished assets. Everything should be as great as it looks on the store page as it does in your game. And you'll be surprised how many developers don't do that. They may use footage that is cropped wrong, or they'll just kind of just stream like raw footage and put that into their trailer or their store page. Now you have to put in work for it if you want the consumer to take your game seriously. Let's switch back over to the development side of your game, and for our next point, it's not doing any playtesting. Once again, as I've said many times, you need to playtest your game. You need to playtest your game multiple times. You need people to be looking at your game and giving you honest feedback as to, is it good, is it bad, what do they like, what do they not like, what are they confused about? And again, you want to make sure that you're actually picking out what people are saying, which takes us to our next point, not learning anything from playtesting. Because again, if people are having trouble with your game, then it's surely their fault. Your game was designed perfectly with everything in its proper place. If you're showing your game off to hardcore fans of a genre, as we've said many points before, and they are hating it or they're confused by it, that should be raising a very huge red flag. If you're showing your game off to new people and they have no idea what the heck they're doing, there's another red flag for you. But you need to be able to understand what people are saying about your game, because you can have 10 people say 10 different things and they're all referencing the same point. And to that point, our next one is only doing one playtest session. Because again, all you need is one playtest and your game will be perfect. Everything will be figured out in exactly 20 minutes or less. Now, you need multiple people to be looking at your game. Hardcore fans, newcomers, middle of the roads. You want as much of a kind of spectrum of fans to look at your game to understand what it is that works, what doesn't work. And as I said earlier, when it comes to being able to show your game off, to be able to reach out to potential fans, this is how you can sort of find playtesters. If you know there's a major convention going on, and you go there and say, well, here, check out my game. Or you know there's a forum where that's all about your potential fans, let them know that you're working on a game. You like some, free feedback all about it. A lot of people will be happy to do that. And again, if you do have the money, you can hire a consultant or someone to do like formal playtesting as well. But you need to get this done. Let's get back to some points about kind of the development side or planning of your game. And our next one is picking an overused genre. Because I'm sure no one is making a game like Balatro, or Vampire Survivors, or Darkest Dungeon, or Slay the Spire, or pick any major game here. As we've said, there's a tendency for developers to immediately rush out and try and copy whatever is the new hotness at the time. Sometimes that can lead to amazing offshoots that do something completely different. With Vampire Survivors, we saw that with Brotato, Pick a Unique Dreams, 20 Minutes Till Dawn. But we also see so many takes that are just this game, but worse. And the more examples of a game that are out there, or of that genre, the harder it becomes to make a mark in it. Because you're competing with that main game, and you're competing with all the other games that are taking up oxygen in the space. So unless you can come up with a reason that is completely new and different for that genre, you don't want to be chasing those trends, because by the time you get that game out, that trend may have already came and went. Just you can pick a genre that there's so many games in that no one knows how to find all the time, there's also picking a genre that no one has ever heard of, or picking something that is just, well, who else is even thinking about this game at the moment? This is where it gets very tricky in terms of game design and marketing, because making something that no one has ever seen before is a great hook, but at the same time, you need to be able to market that to people. You need to be able to show people why this game is great and unique and original. You need to play it. And the more kind of out there a game genre is, or a game type, it becomes harder to do that. And this is why you need to be really careful when it comes to designing your game. Just because it's a unique and original idea doesn't automatically mean it's a multi-million-dollar one that everyone's going to want to love and play. If your insane idea goes in front of playtesters and everyone hates it and doesn't want to play it, that's not going to be a hill you're going to be able to climb up anytime soon. And it's why you need to be very careful about when you want to break the rules and when you want to adhere to them for any specific design. Now, our next 2 points are 2 different no-nos, starting off with copying a popular game in a genre. Now, this is not the same as picking an overused genre. This is you just saying, well, people play Balatro, I'm going to make my version of Balatro. People play Mario, here's my version of Mario, or Castlevania, or Doom, or whatever. You do not want to be competing directly with a game like this. You can, of course, use these games as foundation to go forward. As we said with Clair Obscur, what makes it work so well is that these developers really understood JRPG design. They played a lot of them, and they used that knowledge to make their own. That's not the same as saying, I'm just going to copy everything about Final Fantasy, but replace everyone with dogs, or monkeys, or insert anything here. You cannot copy someone else's game like that. Even though there's no official rules about it, people will know. And if they think you're just trying to rip off someone else's game, they are going to come down on you, and that's going to hurt the reputation for you and your studio. And with that, our next point is one that has been another hidden killer for a lot of indie developers. Copying your previous game, point for point. I have played a lot of games from smaller developers where it just feels like I'm playing the same exact game. Nothing is changing from game 1 to game 2 to game 3. Maybe instead of a blue sky and green earth, it is green sky and blue earth. But it's the same gameplay, it's the same thing over and over again. And you may think, well, if it worked the first time, surely it will work the second, third, fifth, 8th, 10th time. But people want to see you grow. They want to see things improve. This is how you start growing your reputation as a developer. And it leads again back into sustainability. That as you keep growing, more and more people will find you. They'll want to support you. They want to see what you do next. They don't want to see you just making the same exact game over and over again. And worse, making the exact same mistakes or the exact same pain points from each game. If you can't grow as a developer, you're never going to be able to get and be able to keep a fan base of people who want to see you keep growing and going. Earlier I said about the issues of over-scoping your game, but during development it's also a point to over-design it. And this is where we get to, once again, thinking way outside the box. I'm going to build a platformer where there is 87 different kinds of jumping. We're going to have completely procedurally generated traps, and we're going to use AI to generate brand new traps. And we're going to also create a story that has 10,000 different endings that you can go after. As we've said, the goal of a game's development is to get it released. Duh, I know. But you need to be able to, once again, look at your game and understand what is critical. What is my game? What must be in this title at 1.0 for us to say that this game is finished? Or if it's, early access or a long form game, what is going to be the base, again, foundation or sale of this? You don't want to be, again, throwing more and more on top of a game, because once again, it leads to scope creep. It leads to this game going from being a simple idea to this massive one that you may never even finish. Or worse, you could take an idea that could have been handled relatively easy and just turn to this mess that is just completely unsolvable and unplayable. Conversely, you can also underdesign your game, and that is making something that we have seen a million times before. There is nothing interesting about it. There's nothing that is uniquely marketable about. Again, you can't just say, well, my game is a first-person shooter. My game is a real-time strategy. It's a match 3. Okay, that's great. Why should I care about it? And if you can't answer that question, again, through your design, through your marketing, people are not going to answer it for you. There has to be a through line throughout your title that gets people excited. With a platformer, what about, super difficult Super Meat Boy level challenges? What about a soulful, emotional one like a Celeste or a Braid? Unique puzzles, unique visuals, something, again, that makes this game uniquely yours. And again, you can't just say, well, my game is just like Slay the Spire, or it's just like any one of those co-op horror games that everyone is playing. You need to be able to put something unique and original into your game. Because if you don't have that, then again, everything else is just going to fall apart. And in that process, to our next point, not keeping track of your budget. As I've said earlier in this video, and this will probably coming up later on, the management side of game development is one of the hardest to learn, but still one of the most crucial to get right. And it's very easy not to keep track of how much money you're really spending. Now, if you're a sole developer, first time, and you're just working on this in your spare time, this stuff doesn't really concern you. If you're trying to manage 10, 15, 20 different people across multiple continents and making sure everyone's getting paid and keeping track of what's happening, this gets very important. Because if you run out of money, you kind of run out of your ability to make a game or have people help you make that game. And we have seen, again, cases where developers overcommit or they overpromise in this respect, and things just kind of fall out from underneath them. So guess what? This video is at 25 of our 50 points, and my voice is dying. So I'm going to disappear for a second and come back with another shirt. Maybe it'll be a more lighting out here, but we'll get back for points 26 through 50 in a second.
The next day,
we're back. Different shirt, different time. Maybe I just wear the same 5 shirts for every critical thought. No one will ever know. But we're halfway done the list, and we're going with number 26. Now, returning to Kickstarter, it is very easy to just take your first idea, first prototype, and go, I want to turn this into a Kickstarter and get anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000, $100,000, $5 billion. But you need to prepare for a Kickstarter. You have to have something that is concrete to show to people. For video games in particular, especially today, you should not be going to Kickstarter until you have a working prototype, ideally a working demo that you can show people. Because you can talk all the words and propping up as much as you can. If there's nothing there, people aren't going to give you any money. The days in which you can just go on the Kickstarter and say, I got an idea about a game, give me $50,000, and people will give it to you, are gone. Incidentally, if you want to give me $50,000 for doing this list, please get in touch. But you want to prepare for your Kickstarter. And again, when we talk to developers, ideally, minimum, I would say 3 to 6 months. Most developers like 6 to 12 months of preparation, especially if you're going to go for a larger Kickstarter. Which takes us to our next point. Expecting too much from Kickstarter. There is this intent to just throw everything or build your entire hopes and dreams off of your Kickstarter. And like I said, in the mid-2010s, that was kind of the style for a lot of these games. People were rushing on the Kickstarter or to any crowdfunding with basically either we get the Kickstarter or this game is dead and we will never make it ever again. You don't want to be expecting or putting all your hopes and dreams on your Kickstarter, especially your first one. But a tip that we've seen from a lot of developers is if their first Kickstarter fails, they'll come back with it altered. They'll add more goals or rewards, they'll have a more polished or improved demo, and they may just lower the actual funding goal. And while that may not seem like the best thing for a game, it's the difference between either getting some money or getting no money. But again, you need to make sure you go into Kickstarter under the assumption that it may not work. And if it doesn't work, you should still be able to ride things out beyond just that Kickstarter and come back hopefully stronger with it. So speaking about putting too much or expecting too much from your Kickstarter, my next point is over-committing from your Kickstarter plans. And what I mean by this is putting way too many things into your stretch goals, to your promises. And we have seen this sink a lot of Kickstarters in the past. Having a stretch goal like a new level, bonus soundtrack, voiceovers, okay, that stuff is great. Adding stretch goals like, we're going to add in a brand new first-person shooter mode, and our next goal, we're going to add the dating sim mode. And this stretch goal adds 17 new biomes, complete with original art, enemies, recipes, events, all procedurally generated. Somewhere a project manager just jumped out a window as I said that. But you need to be aware of how much of this work adds on to your game, and more importantly, adds on to the time and money that goes into it. If your Kickstarter buys you, let's say, a year's worth of development funding, and the stretch goals you just got filled add 2 to 3 more years of development on top, something is not going to quite work. One of the better examples of how to manage this came from Harebrained Schemes, when they're doing Kickstarters for some of their games. I think one of them was the Battletech one. What they said was, when we hit certain milestones of our stretch goals, we're going to add more time to our game. So if the game, okay, just as a hypothetical, if we just hit our main funding goal, we're going to estimate a year to 2 years of development. If we hit 4 of our stretch goals, we're going to add on an additional 6 to 8 months of time to basically a lot for that additional work. You need to be thinking about this kind of stuff when it comes to your Kickstarter, because it's very easy to bog everyone down. And it's another point about that, make sure your stretch goals make sense. You don't want to be just throwing any and every idea you have into your stretch goals, because if they get filled, you're on the hook to put them in. And again, while smaller things like, a bonus soundtrack, bonus level, maybe new weapons, that kind of stuff you should be figuring out should be part of your process. But making grand gestures like brand new game systems, unique and original content that we haven't even thought of yet, that stuff can easily drive you crazy and can lead to these Kickstarter projects ballooning in scope. I still need to talk to Yacht Club Games at some point about what it was like in terms of having to develop all the expansions and post-release content that came with their Kickstarter funding, and just how they managed to accomplish that over the years. But again, you want to be very mindful as to what you're promising and what you can deliver at the end of the day. And as another point about delivering, for our next example, it is ruining your budget with bonus goods. And when we talk about this, we're specifically talking about things from a physical or a fulfillment point of view. If you're just offering a digital key of your game, okay, yeah, we're not having to worry about shipping that all around the world. But if you're promising physical goods from everything from a soundtrack to clothing, stickers, figurines, plushies, belts, hats, pants, shirts, anything else you can imagine, this adds up. And it's time for the two most dreaded words when it comes to fulfillment: international shipping. A few of you probably just held your heart in horror with those mentioning that. But you see, fulfillment, especially unfortunately in today's market where everything that's happening worldwide, has become tremendously harder. And you need to be very much aware of this. And it's why you need to plan this stuff out way in advance. And even then, they may not work if something happens in certain countries that could cause delays, or tariffs, or other annoyances along these lines. But if you're going to offer physical goods, you need to do your research. Different manufacturers, what they charge, how much you're going to get for, different bulk orders, their materials, etc., etc. While this can be very scary, the best advice I got from developers who do like tabletop and physical goods was, again, do your research. Don't just take one manufacturer as all you're going to do. Look around, get as much information as you can, and if you're going to have trouble with this from a fulfillment point of view, there are companies that specialize in the fulfillment logistics side of shipping things all around the world. Once again, you're going to have to do that research for it. And if you don't do that, you could be left with the nightmare of having to ship thousands of boxes all around the world to different countries with different currencies and borders and tariffs, and I'm getting scared just thinking about this. For the final point of our Kickstarter, grouping here, this is another one that it has doomed developers. I have seen this, and I'm not going to name names because it would kind of out a few of them, but it is not planning your Kickstarter budget properly. As we've said, when it comes to Kickstarter, you can ask for any amount of money that you want. $100, $1,000, $500,000, whatever. But you need to do the right math. And I've seen developers who try to mess with those numbers. They'll say, yeah, we need $50,000 to completely finish this game from top to bottom, when that number is actually maybe closer to 80 or 100,000. But they're not going to say that because they want to at least get the barest of the minimum, and then they'll try and figure out as many different ways to cut corners and get that game out. We've seen a few games that have done just that over the years. And what ends up happening is that the game comes out and it is a shell of what was promised. And in a lot of cases, that is the death nail for that studio, because everyone knows that this is the company that lied about what they were looking for in terms of investment. So, when it comes to Kickstarter in this respect, whatever you set as your goals should be as accurate as possible. And again, especially if you're going to do stuff with stretch goals. You can, again, ask whatever you want for a stretch goal. But if you say, if you give us $10 more, we'll completely port our game to every single platform, that's out there, people are going to look at you a little funny for that. And again, I think I just gave a heart attack to a few publishers who are maybe watching this video. Our next point is one that specifically can hurt mid to large size development teams, and that is not organizing your team. Whether it is a 2-person, 5, 10, 20, 50, 800 indie team, I'm sure there's a few of them out there. Being able to manage a group of people is its own special kind of hell, and why there are people who specialize in project management and being a manager along those lines. But when you are working with a group of people, especially if you're doing this virtually, where everyone's in a different time zone or even on a different continent, you need someone to handle the management side of things, making sure things are staying on task, everyone knows what they're doing, they're communicating well, using tools like Jira and other stuff out there. There has to be someone in control over this. And I know some people don't like being the bad guy in this respect and telling people what to do, but if we're talking about getting a game from beginning to end, there has to be some kind of management and organization going on. Because what can easily doom a project is everyone doing their own thing, no one knows who's doing what. Is the art done? No, it's not. Well, let's take another few weeks. And, there's a few more bugs. We'll fix that, in a few months. Who cares? And things just keep piling up and up and up. And suddenly you're left with this mismatched mess, and everyone hates working with everyone, and the project dies. And I'm sure a few of you watching this has maybe had teams that has happened to. But at the end of the day, whether it's you as a lead designer or hiring someone to be the project manager, there has to be someone keeping track of all this madness that's going on. Alright, we're getting back to the game design and gameplay points. And these are the ones that I pay very close attention to when I look at video games. Our next one is the ever popular just keep adding more. Now, this is not the same as overscoping your game, which is just planning this, mind-blowing 15-year development cycle. This is the temptation to just keep adding more. We start with 5 levels, but you know what? I will add another 20 levels. This was a first-person shooter. Well, what would be great? Let's add an entire crafting, cooking mode to it. But now, let's throw in a restaurant. And, on top of that restaurant, let's have a food critic. And then, let's just do a whole mock, Iron Chef mode in our first-person shooter. And we'll just keep adding more and more. And if another game comes out that has something cool in it, we'll just add that to our game. And that can certainly lead to a game taking forever to be finished. Hint, hint, wink, wink. You need to be able to figure out what is essential to your game. Whether that is a 20 map campaign, 5 levels, 3 to 5 hour long story. A great conversation that I had with Chris Park a long time ago along these lines was understanding, okay, this is my main content. These are I kind of like it, but it's not required to have it. If the game does well enough, we'll think about adding this stuff in. If it doesn't do well enough, we leave it out, but you're still left with a great game nonetheless. And with the temptation to just keep adding systems to your game, our next point is never finishing the base game. Now, what we mean by this is for developers who'd like to add post-release support, add more and more content, stuff along those lines, there's this tendency to just never figure out what 1.0 of your game looks like. We're just going to keep adding more to the game. Add more and more. So the game is never actually released. So, okay, we finished the snowboarding systems. Now, let's add in all the hoverboarding and skateboarding. And then we'll go into airplanes with completely realistic physics. And once again, someone's having a heart attack out there. You need to understand and figure out when it comes to your game's development, what does 1.0 of your game look like? Is it 10 levels long? 5 hours? 8 hours? 20 minutes, you have to be able to set an endpoint. Not only is it important from a management standpoint, but it's also very important for your own mental health. Being able to say, okay, when I have this, and this, my game is done. Or it's done enough that I can release it. If you keep adding, or you're never sure as to what your game's actual experience is going to be, you can end up making something that just not only takes forever, but it just feels like this mess of mechanics and systems. We're just going to keep adding more and more and more to it. And you want to be able to say that this is my core gameplay. This is what you're coming to buy my game and what you want to play. As I said with the previous point, you can have additional content. You can think about post-release support. You can think about having additional things to add. But at the end of the day, you have to be able to sit down and honestly say to yourself and to your team, this right here is what our game is. Line in the sand, case closed. This is what we need to put in our game. Everything else is just secondary or optional. Maybe it would be nice to have, but we need to get this done or we don't have a game. And speaking about getting people to play a game, our next point is never showing your game off. There are 2 points about this. The first is never showing your game because you're afraid someone's going to take this idea and steal it, or you never show your game because you don't want to get any feedback, or you think your game is perfect, or you wait until the game is completely done, and then you put it on a store page, and you did nothing else to let people know about it. As part of the marketing, and again, even as part of the play testing of your game, you have to show it to people. You need to let people know that you are, in fact, working on a game. As we've said with a lot of the previous points when it comes to marketing and the PR side. You cannot just sit in your house/cave for 20 years, work on a game with no contact from the outside world, and expect it to do well. For one thing, things will change, and you need to be aware of what is happening around you. As another point, the consumer base can change. And I have seen games that developers started working on when no one else was making anything in that genre, and by the time it was done, the genre has been flooded with games of that example. You need to be showing your game off. You need people to be talking about it. And as we've said, every game is different in terms of when you should be showing it to people. But more often than not, the best time is when you have something unique to show. When it is at the point that you have your core gameplay loop down, you have a demo or you have a trailer, you know exactly what this game is going to be. Get it out there. Get people talking about it. And don't stop talking about it. Because this is how you build word of mouth, and this is how you get people interested and invested in your game and in your studio. And please, please, do not wait until the week before your game is done to start talking to people or reaching out about it. Please. Now, on the point about never finishing your base game, a kind of side trap that goes into that is the constant need to switch game engines. Choosing your game engine is a very fun and easy time, as every developer and programmer will certainly agree with down below. But it's still something you need to figure out. Different game engines work better with different genres. You of course have engine/tool sets that are made for specific genres, such as RPG Maker, RPG in a Box, Adventure Game Studio, Z-Doom, and so on. And the error that people looked down on non-commercial engines or these kind of tool sets has fortunately gone away. With all the successes of games with Adventure Game Studio, all these Z-Doom of full conversion mods turned into full games, stuff like Fear and Hunger, Look Outside, and many more RPG Maker titles. People are more willing to try these games from lesser or unknown game engines than they were 5 to 10 years ago. But you still need to pick an engine and make sure that it works for your game. And again, choosing which engine works best for you, we are not getting on that topic in this video. But it's still an essential part of your game's development. You want to be very careful because switching dramatically to different engines is kind of like starting over in a lot of cases. If you're going from Game Maker to learning Unreal Engine, that's going to be a very fun trip, which I'm sure everyone here has probably done multiple times, right? Our next set is going to be about your gameplay, because of course there has to be some gameplay points in this video. And our first one here is going to be making your game too easy. Yes, you may be hearing all the talks about approachability and accessibility, and again, we've talked about playtesting here and there. But you see, you need to be aware that if people aren't finding your game interesting, exciting, if there's nothing holding their attention, they're out the door. And even with all these talks and the importance of approachability and accessibility, you don't want your game to essentially just be autopilot. That you can just turn your brain off, don't think, and the game just plays itself. There has to be interaction involved. Because while everyone will say how great it is to have a story mode or an ultra easy or auto skip feature, for a lot of people, if they're falling asleep at their keyboard or their gamepad trying to play your game, A, they're not going to finish that game, and B, they're not going to be checking anything else out from you in the future. But if you think that just means to design everything as Dark Souls Soul Level 1 blindfolded challenges, no. Our next point is making your game too hard. For all the tryhards out there who say games like Llama Llama, Hollow Knight, Soul and Sanctuary, Ultra Kill, Doom Eternal, pick any challenging game that it's too easy and we need to make it 1,000 times harder to get the real fans, they're of course completely wrong. And you need to again have a very measured approach to your game design. It is better to have kind of the layers of additional complexity and challenge to your game rather than just hitting the player over the head that the second they take 2 steps into the game, they're dead, their character is wiped, their credit card gets charged $1,000, their computer gets formatted, all that other great stuff. Good game designers understand that a balanced experience that they can then tweak or allow the player to tweak to make it easier or harder is always better than forcing a game to either be too easy or too hard. And again, it's why when we talk about balancing and difficulty design, that it is a very complicated topic, and developers who get this right will oftentimes lead to making very amazing games, and more importantly, they make amazing games that everyone can appreciate, whether they are a first-timer, a hardcore player, playing the game on super easy, masochistically difficult, or anywhere in between. Now, if you enjoyed our difficulty pairing, our next points involve the pacing of your game. And we're going to start with making your game play too slow. We all enjoy the 80-hour-long intro to a game where your character only walks at a snail's pace and they have to basically cross the size of Texas before they can actually get the power to run. Many developers like to slow things down at the start for tons and tons and tons and tons of exposition and learning all about the entire cosmology of the world. And this will only take about 5 hours where you can actually start controlling your character. And then you control your character for 2 minutes to then get another 6-hour lecture. You don't want your game to feel slow. And again, there is an art to pacing when it comes to a game, whether we're talking about a puzzle game, an action game, a turn-based game, real-time pausing time-based games. You want the player to be enjoying your game from the get-go, and while there may be a little bit of slowness with the onboarding, that I'll come back to it in a few minutes, you want them to feel like they're getting engaged by the game, not having to basically pay a 5-hour-long gamer tax before the real game begins. However, going too fast is our next point, but some games like to throw everything at the player right from the start. There's no tutorial or here's 80 different troops to control in a strategy game. We're going to start this action game having you fight endgame style Elden Ring bosses from the very first moment of play. Progression and pacing is about a steady progression curve. Things need to start out letting the player get into things, and then we escalate from there. And we have to escalate at a very measured and kind of set pace. You don't want to go, okay, we go from a level 2 difficulty to 10, to back to 5, to 87, to -6, to 0. You want the player to feel like they are approaching the story or approaching this gameplay at their own pace. And they don't want to feel rushed or essentially thrown to the wolves before they even understand what the game is, and they just get frustrated and they get tired of playing. And it's an important point about this when it comes to like RPG design. It's about giving the player a very solid base way of playing. A very famous point I remember from one of Ernest Adams' articles was about the RPGs, especially CRPGs, where you start playing and within 20 seconds of loading the game, you need to fill out a 20-page character sheet with all the attributes, stats, perks, bonuses, class traits, racial traits, where your character's nationality came from, what are their parents, what are their parents like, what's their favorite food, what's their favorite culture, what's their favorite TV show, and all of this will build your character you're going to be using for the next 80 to 100 hours. And if you mess anything of it up, your character is doomed. You need to give the player time to breathe. But again, as we said in the previous point, they need to feel like they're being engaged by the game within their own pace. And like I said, it is very hard to do that right, and why playtesting is such a crucial point about game development. The previous points, we've talked about games being too easy, too hard, slow, fast, and all that. But this all adds up to another important point, and that is having no onboarding in your game. No tutorials, no menus, nothing that explains to the player how to even start playing your game. As I've said countless times, the genre you're working in is going to be a huge factor as to the amount of onboarding you need to do. But there has to be something. There has to be some basic element of, this is how you play my game. You cannot rely on other developers and other games doing your onboarding for you. And if you're doing anything unique or original, that needs to be spelled out to the player. And as I've said, your goal for your onboarding is to be able to explain to someone, what are they doing, how do they do it, why are they doing it. And if you don't have that, you are severely limiting your game's potential audience. Because all it takes for someone to start your game, be completely confused, get killed or frustrated, and they're gone. And it's why we say that many people will leave a game within the first 5 to 10 minutes of playing. So whether you are making a simple platformer, to a grand strategy game, to horror strategy, dating sim, visual novel, whatever, there needs to be some element of onboarding. Because every game is somebody's first. And you don't want to chase away a potential fan because you didn't do anything in this first step process. And now we get to some of the more, I guess, not so exciting points. But there's still something I'm sure a few of you have failed on, and they can still ruin an indie game or any game if you fail to catch them. And we're going to start with having no key rebinding whatsoever. With games today, everyone has their own preferred way of playing. From first-person shooters to strategy to platformers, from keyboards, gamepads, steering wheels, dance pads, virtual saxophones, you name it. People want to be able to play a game in their preferred way. And while you always need to have a control scheme developed for it, you want to offer players the option to change things. Because maybe someone has their own way of playing. Maybe they have a better way of playing. And again, this is why playtesting can also help figure out what your best control scheme should be. Nevertheless, you need to allow the player to change keys. Especially when we're talking about games that make use of either a gamepad or keyboard and mouse. because both of those peripherals are very different in terms of their key placements and button arrangements, and you want to make sure that the player is comfortable playing your game. And if they're not, this is something that doesn't go away after hours of playing. You can't get good at finger cramps or repetitive stress injuries. And if your game is hurting someone's hands, they're not going to keep playing it. They're going to stop, refund it, and probably get some ice or some icy hot to help their fingers. Now, our next point is an offshoot of not having a control scheme, and that is having no options menu whatsoever. Because we have certainly seen a few games that have had no volume sliders for their game, where you can't lower the volume and it starts and it deafens the person playing it while they're especially streaming it to their audience. But this even goes beyond that. Not having the ability to set a different screen resolution, VSync, affecting the FPS. Because I like to turn on an indie game and hear my computer's fan go into an airplane or jet airplane mode because it's running at 800 frames per second for a match 3 puzzle game. You need to have an options menu. You need to allow the player to be able to adjust these things on the fly. And not having them is one of the signs of a low quality game. Some people can look past this. For others, it is a just absolute failure. We're ending this game right here. Especially again, if your game starts and they become deafened by all the music that you've set to 800% of a volume, and there's no way to slide that down. The importance of approachability and accessibility features are still vital for games today, and our next point is having no accessibility features. So, as we've said, accessibility features help someone who has an issue or something preventing them from playing a game. Whether that's simple things, or I should say, quote-unquote simple things like a color blindness mode, to subtitles, to even be able to change or affect aspects of the game that may be hurting them or preventing them from playing. Talking about a game that is very physically demanding, having options to maybe remove or adjust inputs, allowing someone to play using a specialty peripheral as well. While again, this stuff may not sound all that important to some of you, this is, again, another way to get fans to check out your game, and more importantly, it makes you a better designer to have these things planned out well in advance, and have a greater potential for someone to be able to enjoy your game. As I said in the onboarding point, every game is somebody's first, and they don't want to play a game that causes eye pain, or, muscle tension, or they just physically can't play your game without being sick. Because as I'm sure everyone here can agree, they love a game that features strobing lights that flash rapidly between fluorescent pink, yellow, and green at 200 frames per second every 3 seconds, also accompanied by an air raid siren going off in the person's ears. That is always the best experience I know for a game. But it's why you need to look into these features. And the days, as an interesting point, the days in which every game should have this finger-breaking QTE to every single thing you do is long past. And again, accessibility features should not be like gameplay reliant. As in, you shouldn't be building your game around, let's say, a puzzle that requires you to look at rapidly strobing images, or have to mash 5 keys, 6 buttons, and slam your foot down in the span of 40 seconds in order to get through a section. Now, our next point is kind of a half joke, but not really, and that is your game causing someone's computer or game system to blow up. I know, it's not exactly the most exciting point, but you want to make sure your game is as bug-free as possible. And again, bugs in games can be very small, like a character's shirt changes colors when they jump up and down, to once again, game locks up and causes someone's computer's hard drive to melt. You want to be, again, positioning your game in the best possible state when it comes to releasing it. And again, whether you're releasing this on any platform, it doesn't matter. You want someone to be able to download your game and play it without causing any, again, long-term destruction to a computer. And that's why it's important to keep track of bugs And like I said, not every bug is going to be this end of the world. It will destroy your game if you leave it in. But you need to be able to prioritize what's important to your experience and inform the consumer about that, because they will be more than willing to understand if you know that if you step on the 6th tile in the 4th level with the red sneakers on, it may cause a game crash, versus someone hits start and their entire tower goes up like a mushroom cloud. Our next point is a brand new one for 2025, and that is using Gen AI to build your game, specifically building the core elements of it. This is very much a huge no-no. And while I understand, especially for smaller teams or sole developers, not having your own composer, artist, playtester, and designer on staff at all times can be limiting. But at the end of the day, a video game needs to be created by hand. And one that we have seen is that Gen AI is just not really what's going to drive people to play your game. When we look at all the games that have become big, modest, or even small successes, they were made by a passionate group of people or just one person because that's the game they want to make. And while you can certainly make the case for, again, having AI elements if it's, on point about having, an AI voice or something along those lines, if you're building your entire game design, your entire game systems using Gen AI, then what is actually going to make this game interesting or stand out? And as we've said, there's been procedural generation used in countless games, even linear games over the years. But that is just used to, again, build a very basic foundation and then put everything else on top of. If you're saying to yourself, well, I don't need to design all these levels, I'll just let the AI, I'll just type this into ChatGPT or whatever is the latest program to get an idea for a level, that is not going to work. And people want to play games by passionate developers. As we've said over the course of this video and in other points, that people want to support developers. They want to see this developer grow and improve. They don't want you to just be copying what everyone else is doing, or not even designing the game on your own. And if you think that this is going to change or be better for consumers, especially as an indie developer, it's not. Because fans of indie games are very well versed. And if they see that you're just using Gen AI to just build your entire game, they'll go to any one of the other countless games that are out there that's on or on their backlog to play because they know that was made entirely by hand. And that's kind of the whole point of game development in a nutshell. Alright, we're almost done. For our next point, this is one of the more stickier ones that you can fall into, and that is incorrectly pricing your game. Now, this can either be pricing your game too cheaply or too expensive. People, especially in today's market, want a qualitative experience. They are willing to pay more if the game gives more. So, putting out a game and saying, well, my game is only going to be 99 cents or 40 cents, or maybe you'll put out a game for a penny. While that may sound like a really great deal, there's a few problems with that. One, people are going to immediately ask, what's wrong with your game if you're charging a penny for it? And two, if you're trying to live off of that, you're going to need a whole mess of pennies if you expect to break even off of it. Now, on the other side, pricing your game too highly is another point. If you're building a 2-hour-long platformer, charging $70 for that is not going to work for people. And we have seen indie developers, especially the last 5 years, raising the kind of minimum price for what a game should be. Again, it used to be that the standard was like $4.99 and $9.99 was, high for an indie dev. Today, we're seeing prices average around like $14.99 to $19.99 at minimum, and then kind of on the quote-unquote higher side, $24 or $30. We're even seeing some indie games being going for higher than that. And it's about again, getting what you are owed out of your game. But you need to be very mindful as to what the market is. And again, as we've said with everything that we've talked about, understanding how much goes into that game. Because just saying, well, if I add 80 more levels, I can charge 80 more dollars, that's not going to work. You have to read the market, you have to read the genre in terms of what people expect and what is a fair price for these games. Now, that doesn't mean you can't make something that is purposely on the cheaper side or purposely on the more expensive side, if you can package it right. I have played some amazing games that are like $2.99, $3.99, and they're designed for like a 2 to 4 hour long experience. These games were not in development for 5 to 10 years, I can assure you. And like I said, we've seen games at the $25, $30 price point that were amazing games that were worth every one of those pennies that went into that price. But you need, again, to figure out what that price is and also how you're going to approaching from a sales point of view. Because you can, put your game onto any amount of sales you want. You have to be very careful of trying to raise that price once your game's been released. And while this doesn't sound like a horribly damning point, especially compared to everything else that we've talked about, it can still hurt you if you price your game too highly that no one wants to play it, or you price it so low that you don't even have anywhere of what could be considered an income or a budget to work on your next game, or pay the rest of your team. And like I said, this is the kind of stuff that it doesn't hurt you immediately, but it can hurt you over the long run. Now, speaking about pricing and long-term support of your game, the next point is overcommitting to post-release support. As we said with some of the earlier points about finishing your game, understanding what your base game should be, there's always that room or that idea to have more content coming. Some developers will promise that, or they'll have a roadmap for Beyond 1.0. Some developers will take a wait-and-see approach. But you need to be very mindful to how much or how little post-release support you want to commit to. And this can easily destroy all the revenue you earn from a game, especially if you promise 10 different unique DLCs, all coming within a year, one right after another, with completely brand new systems and rules to it. For some games, such as strategy games, RPGs, where you can add in different areas, different regions, new characters, new gear, whatever, this can be a way to keep a game going and growing. But you need to be thinking about this during development, either doing a lot, a little, or somewhere in between. And you have to communicate that to the consumers. Because some people will say, well, I enjoyed your game, you got more coming, and you tell them no, and they'll be very dejected. Or they'll play your game and go, well, this is boring, not understanding that you have 80 more hours of DLC coming. But this is part of the development process of your game. Understanding what is 1.0 of your game, what does your game look like in 6 months, a year, and this doesn't involve live service. Live service is its own unique can of worms, and we could do 50 ways to ruin your live service game if my voice ever recovers from this one. But if we're talking about an indie game, one where your main game or your base game has a fixed beginning, middle, and end to it, if you're going to continue that, you need to explain it to consumers and you need to properly plan for it. Some developers I've seen sometimes use their post-release support as almost a redemption play. That they'll create the real version of their game, like version 2.0, 5.0, 87.0, and will take them even maybe longer than the original game's development to get it out. And if you do that, you have to really justify it beyond just, I really want to make this game work. Your game should work, obviously, at 1.0. But you don't want to keep throwing more and more out there. And as we've talked about when it comes to expansions or DLC, if you have a crazy idea for something that didn't quite fit with the main game but could still make your game bigger and better, yeah, throw that into DLC if you can justify it. But you have to, at the end of the day, realize, okay, there's going to be a point where we're out of ideas, or we're out of ideas that work for this game. and you have to move on to something else. And again, people may complain at that point, but if you put out 20 DLCs that have all done really well, I think they can be happy with all that support after release. Alright, we're down to 2 final points, and both of these are very scary for any developer, let alone an indie one. Our next one is one that we talked about a little bit earlier, but it kind of makes it as its own point here. Only having one game idea in your head. This goes several different ways. The first is, as we've said, only working on the dream game. I don't care if it takes 10 years, 30 years, 10,000 years. I will make that one game. As we've said, that leads to games being just an incomprehensible mess. It leads to that game never earning any revenue, and in many cases, it leads to you completely burning out on the entire idea. But the other point about this is only thinking about your game dev career from one game. That is it. That's the only idea you have. That's the only idea that you will ever make. A good game developer, just like anyone in a creative field, has millions upon millions of ideas. I'm sure a few of you probably have at least 10 to 20 ideas swirling around in your head as we're talking about this. This is the spark that keeps you engaged and makes you want to keep working on things. You can't just dedicate everything just to one idea and then say, well, I'm done. I'm never going to make anything else. Because that's not how you have a sustainable career in this industry. You have to be thinking about what your next game is going to be, and the game after that, and the game after that. And a few of you are probably crying at your computer right now as I'm saying these words. There has to be a plan going forward. And not every one of your ideas is going to be a 3 to 5 year, 8 to 10 year, 10 minutes to 40 minute long idea. You should be having different ideas. And this leads to, again, what we've talked about with sustainability as the health of a studio. Be able to come up with very different ideas, all growing your brand, growing your portfolio in different ways. As I've talked about with Strange Scaffold and their portfolio, having a variety of games and all these different ideas, not only does it help you kind of branch out, but also allows you the freedom to, well, have different ideas. So you're not just pigeonholed into making one genre for the rest of your life. Unless you really enjoy that, then go nuts. But it's always great to have different ideas and be able to do them in vastly different ways. Again, not every game's development is going to be exactly the same. But you want to be able to experiment and grow. Because that's how you attract fans. That's how we see these amazing games come out. Because the developer doesn't just release one game and calls it a quit. They create more. And maybe this one game didn't quite work, but one part of that was really great, so let's expand on that for our next game. And suddenly we have that island of misfits toys that somehow creates the next Balatro, or creates something even brand new that we've never seen before. But if you just have one idea, or you only work on one game, you're never really going to be able to explore all these different points. And another part about this is the burnout effect, that you finally release that game, it was such a horrible and time-consuming experience that you never want to work on anything else for the rest of your life. Well, then you're never going to be able to grow or see other things happen when it comes to game dev. So, as we've said all throughout this video and other talks, you want to be thinking about the long-term health of your game and your studio, and more importantly, of your own health, if you want to survive in this industry. And with that, we come to our final point before my voice completely dies on me, and it's perhaps the scariest one of all. Never releasing anything. There is this tendency, as I said earlier, about just keep adding more to your game, to never get a game over the finish line. It is a huge deal to be able to say that my game is done, that you're able to go from beginning to middle to end with a game project. And this is a tremendous achievement, and not everyone gets there. But you need to be able to do this if you want to call yourself a game designer, a game developer. But there is that allure, just keep working on something, to keep switching to something else. Okay, I worked on this game for the last 2 to 3 years, but you know what? I'm not feeling it, so let me start a brand new game. Oh, this one's kind of good, but I'm starting to feel a little bit tired of it. Let's switch to another game idea. And then we have 7 different games, all in different stages of completion, and none of them will ever get done. And someone right now is sobbing on the floor as I'm saying this. If you want to be considered a game developer, you have to develop a game. Duh. And I've seen a lot of first-time developers and students struggle with this idea. At the end of the day, you want to finish a game, whether that gets you 10 million reviews, if it gets you 0 reviews. The only way for you to grow, the only way for you to be able to improve and to avoid all the other 49 points that we've talked about in this video, is to release a game. Whether it's good, bad, horrible, amazing, whatever. Because if you can't finish a game, you're never going to be able to grow and iterate on these ideas. And again, as we've said, you have to grow as a game developer. People want to see you get better from game to game. And if you never release a game, they're never going to be able to see that. And it's why I talk so much about being able to set limits and actual hard stop points for what your game is and what it can be. Because at the end of the day, there has to be something finished. Because if you cannot go through all these steps or the entire development process, you're never going to be able to get something out there. And we've seen developers just hem and haw over this. They are rightfully so afraid of what people think of their game, or that they need to make the perfect game. And it doesn't matter how long it takes or how much money they throw at it. But if you can't do that, you will never be a game developer, and you're going to struggle with being able to release a game. Because if you never release a game, you're never going to see these pain points, these frustrations, the mistakes that you've made, the things that you've done right. And as we've said, each time you develop a game, it should be getting easier for you. You should be understanding what you did right and wrong previously and able to grow that. But just constantly starting projects and never finishing them means that you're never getting the complete experience. And it's oftentimes why, for a lot of people, you just have to kind of buckle down and get the game done. Even if it turns out to be a super amazing, never before seen 10 out of 10 Game of the Year winner, or a 0 out of 10 project that no one even checks out on your itch page or on Steam. But you have to do this. You have to see a project through all the way to the end. Because once you do that just one time, it will allow you so much more when you start working on your next idea and the idea after that. And with that, we're finally done. And let me know which points you have personally failed on down in the comments. And if you are that special developer who has managed to hit all 50 of these failures with your game, let us know about that and then get away very fast from this channel. But with that, we are done. And as I said, if you want me to elaborate on any one of these points or any other points, let me know down in the comments, and hopefully I won't be having to sing this anytime soon. Thanks for watching, and a special thank you to our Patreon supporters. If you enjoyed the video, do the YouTubing stuff, be sure to visit our Discord and Patreon, and you're interested in more in my thoughts on design, check out my game design books.